Okay, it's time to get serious. You see, I had my fair share in schizo shitposting on YouTube. My previous video was an improvisation. I haven't planned any part of that. I just took a stupid fucking whiteboard and just draw some shit, okay? I had these intrusive thoughts about history. That is the main reason why this channel actually exists, okay? I have nothing different to think about. I think I have fixation. I think I'm obsessed with it. The topic of this video came to me as I was going to the grocery store, and I simply got completely lost in it. So I thought to myself, why not actually do this, okay? Why not just, record something, make this narration happen? So this channel is like my autistic therapy, and my obsession with history will maybe somehow, find its way out of my head. So the topic of today is something that struck me. I mean, if you have watched my previous video, you may have got a clue that I am not a big fan of antiquity, okay? I am not a big fan of ancient civilizations. I don't give a shit about Rome, Greece, Carthage, none of that. That's not the meat for me, okay, in history. What I am mostly interested in is, in fact, the modernity, okay? By this I understand 19th century and beyond, okay? To the contemporary times that we are living right now. We're gonna dive into this 19th century shit because I think we can learn something from this. So join me in on this crazy journey. This will be like a stream of thoughts, really. It's not improvised completely, but there is no clear structure, okay? So I hope you'll enjoy this. First of all, in order to understand how groundbreaking the 19th century was actually, we have to understand how the world looked like before the 19th century. And I think it's proper to start with the Great French Revolution, because the French Revolution was a big thing, okay? Because you have a huge European power in the 18th century, at the end of 18th century, who played a major role in all of history. And suddenly, in this country, the old regime has fallen, okay? There is no more absolute monarchy. This is what basically happened. The point is, the people, someone can even say that the society has organized itself in order to overthrow a monarch. Even if that was not a main goal, this is what actually happened. It was a groundbreaking change, mostly because you didn't have such thing in history previously, okay, in this manner. For the 19th century, important point is that the monarchies got scared, because if in France, which was a powerful monarchy, a king could be simply executed by the common folks, then what will gonna happen with other monarchies? And it was not a good time to be a monarch. You had the United States previously, okay, Revolutionary War of United States. And I think that the elites of the old continent got really scared, okay? Like, you don't want to be dead. That's like the basic instinct of you as a human, if you can call the monarchs human, of course, and as a people in general. So, of course, they fought with the Revolutionary France, but the important thing is Revolutionary France gave birth to the Napoleon. And Napoleon spread the ideas of the French Revolution. But after that, you see, Napoleon lost. And for some of you, it will be a shocking news, I know, but we do not live in a times where the France is the dominating power of the continent. But I want you to imagine this specific view, okay, of what happened next. There are people who say that the great political changes is what actually happens. I am not one of those people, okay? I wholeheartedly believe that behind great political changes, there are some much greater processes that happens throughout a long period of time. And you can point to many tendencies and many trends that gave birth to Napoleon and the French Revolution, but I want to focus on what happened next. What happened next is that the European powers decided to make sure none of shit like this will ever happen again, okay? That there will not be a second Napoleon. So they have created a system after the Congress of Vienna to keep Europe and European societies at bay, because those societies were given a taste of somewhat, maybe not even democratic, but I would say more republican order of society. Imagine you were born in 1820. You were born in a peasant's family, in a farm, somewhere in the Middle Europe. For your entire life, you've been working in your village, on farm, okay? Your main focus was agriculture. But suddenly, as you grow older, some weird things are happening, okay? Because there are a lot of inventions that are now entering towns, like the, steam machine, steam engine, to be precise. And this completely revolutionized everything, okay? Suddenly, people are building, as you grow up, those weird, iron roads on which these iron vehicles are going, okay? You can now migrate to the city and you can work in a factory. And factory is also something that we, in our times, accept, okay? We accept the fact that there are those big buildings in which hundreds of people work in some sort of an assembly line and the machines are helping them. That simply didn't exist, okay? So imagine the shock those people have experienced, okay? You cannot live out of agriculture anymore because, you cannot be stable, you cannot be prospering man, and opportunities are open. So you, let's say as an adult man, migrate to city. By the time you're 21, Europe looks completely different, okay? Because you no longer have peasants working under the feudal lords controlling huge areas of land. You have cities that are developing. The main source of income for a state is slowly changing from a few nobles controlling the country's land and exploiting those people in those lands. No, now you're being exploited in the city in a massive scale. But you know what is the difference between the city and the countryside? You are not alone there, okay? Countryside and, in general, villages or farms are sort of isolated communities. You can go to other village, but you will not share your living space with them. Cities, on the other hand, are completely different, okay? You have much more opportunity to connect to people, to meet people, and to see the world. Early industrialization was not a humanitarian process, okay? Those people were exploited, and because you have nothing to get back to, because, well, you've now experienced the life in the city, okay? And you don't want to leave. Yes, you are being exploited. Yes, you're working for 16 hours a day, but there are opportunities, okay? There are entertainments that you will never meet in the village. There are some influences, maybe even intellectual, maybe, in your mentality, that now will not go back to the living in the farms. But most importantly, living in cities at this specific period gave you access to information. Imagine that you, as you were growing up, your main source of information was a priest, probably, okay? Or some other, spiritual leader, pastor, I don't know, pope, whatever, okay? It doesn't really matter. My point is, religious institutions were the main distributor of informations. It was a monopoly on information. And that's why the institutions of religious services were always so tightly connected to the state. And this alliance of the throne and the altar was even more evident in the post-Napoleonic, post-Congress of Vienna Europe. I don't have a whiteboard today, but man, I'm so fucking tempted to just, to paint a map of Europe from that period. No, I will resist this urge. Now I must focus on the language, and I have a lot to say right now. My point is, you are not alone now. There is no going back, okay? You are seeing the machines. Most importantly, you are slowly realizing that as your grandfathers and your ancestors were jealous of the position of the landlord of your farm, now you are being jealous of those who control the factories because they are immensely wealthy. I mean, it's kind of crazy, but if you look at the careers of some industrialists from this era, they could afford things that most of the aristocracy or the noblemen couldn't anymore. All of the pleasures, all of those excitement, adventures, all of those technology. So it was a strange period. It was a period of transformation, but I want you to go further, okay? You see that the center of power is taken out of the nobility and are given to those people who own the factories. And you are now living in a society. There is no turning back from that, in a city society. So you start to ask yourself questions, okay? Especially because you want to start a family and you don't want your children to work as hard as you, and you just simply do not want them to be occasionally exploited, not only by the capitalists, because those were basically the factory owners, or aristocracy. You start want to realize that maybe you have the advantage. It's not like you need those people. You can go back to your countryside, okay? I said it's not possible. Yes, mentally it would be very hard, but you can physically do that. You have some place you can go back to, okay? You go to the city for opportunities, and not because you have to go there. But they need you, okay? The people who run the factories, they all need you. So the question is, if the machines are the future, you know, if the machines and your factories and your life in a city, and if the workers are like this foundation of a completely new world, completely new wealth and power, why are the landlords still the ruling class? It just simply doesn't make sense. Because you were born in 1820, okay? You could see people still sailing on the barks on the English Channel, but suddenly you see a fucking ironclad which weighs, I don't know, I have no fucking idea how much ironclads weight, but yeah. My point is, you see the world changing materially, and you realize that the people who previously have a mandate to rule over you because they control the land and they control the religion, suddenly they have no control over you. There's just no means of controlling cities in this scale. There is no mean of ending this progress. And you start to ask more and more questions, like, why is my voice not heard? Okay, why some information are restricted to me? Because, you know, we have printing press, we have new means of communications, almost mass scale. So we are starting to understand the world better. You understand that even if you live in a city and you have met there are thousands of people, and probably there are 100,000 more people living there, why is one guy ruling the entire show? Okay, why is he running the show? Why is he sacrificing those people in the name of the interest of his own ruling family, his own dynasty, to be precise, his own ambition? These questions and many more eventually led to something that is called the Spring of Nations, okay? And this was like this first big political strike to the Congress of Vienna, the Viennese system of absolute monarchs actually controlling Europe. Big political changes happened there, and you are witnessing it, okay? You have like 28 years and you see that suddenly monarchy in France is gone, okay? Germany almost unified in a republican, you know, bottom-up way. Austrian Empire almost fell apart because of the national revolts. Russian Empire seems to be stable, but it starts to be, you know, more and more marginalized in our politics, because the Western countries now have something that the Russians don't: industrialization, educated society, new institutions that slowly starts to be built in that society. My point is, it still does not answer your questions, okay? Because even if you change the political structure, there is still an entire society that now is still exploited. You are not free. You know exactly you're not free, because the man who owns your factory de facto owns your life, okay? You can go back to the village still, as I said, but you simply don't want this, okay? You want to get on the ironclad that is crossing the English Channel. You want to go to some exotic countries. You want to have a nice, beautiful house. You want to have furniture. Want to have a healthy, wealthy family, okay? So you strive for more. Eventually, your situation does not improve, okay? As you have started working in a factory when you were 20, you are now 40, you are now 60, you are physically completely destroyed because of your work. You probably have a lot of diseases because of the, pollution and everything. And you start to wonder what your child life will be like, okay? And this frustration you feel that you kind of just wasted your entire life starts hitting you pretty hard, okay? This is the moment where a new schools of thoughts enter the realm, okay? So I would like to go back to this time, find this hypothetical Walker, and ask him one simple question, okay? How do you feel? We cannot do this, okay? It's very hard to get some sources on what exactly the working people thought about the system that exploited them. Even if at some point they view this system as better than the agricultural system, than the feudal system, they are starting to lose the hope, okay? They're starting to lose the faith in actual change. And they are looking for solutions different than the usual ones. Not only the religious explanation does no longer works, but the world is getting smaller because you suddenly are living in this huge period of inventions, okay? Huge period of knowledge that is just simply out there, and you can access it much more openly than any of your father, grandfather, whatever. Your ancestors have never held so much information at one place. You have mass press, media, the people are communicating freely, nothing stops you. But you realize that despite all of those informations, something is not right, okay? Still the people in power are in power, and still you, as you have been exploited, you are still exploited. How do you feel about this? Well, I don't know how those workers felt, but I would feel cheated, okay? And I think that we can kind of guess what they felt looking at what was popular at the time, okay? And what was popular at the time was a very simple idea. Marxism. My point is that if you are frustrated enough, you will eventually start to convince yourself that maybe killing those people in charge and taking their property is a good idea. And maybe we shouldn't be bound by, this false idea of no ownership, because it literally lets other people dictate our entire life. So maybe we should, do something about this. This is the period where the idea of workers' rights arise, okay? It's a period where first ideas of how can you improve your workers' life starts to happen. Some capitalists see the need that, okay, maybe we should build them some schools or some houses, okay? Maybe we should somehow improve their condition just to get them away from those thinking about murdering us. But that's not all, okay? Socialism was not like the only ideological answer to the changing world. There were a lot of them. There was the conservatism, the Catholic, school of conservatism and the political thought, which was like, let's make some compromises in the society because we shouldn't accelerate some conflicts. The most, interesting to me was an anarchism, for example. And the anarchists today are like, what they're doing? They're occupying some empty buildings and, I don't know, planting vegetables. No, the anarchists in the 19th century, they have balls, okay? They took their pistol, they went to the street and shot the first mad politicians, okay? There was a wave of terror in the 70s, in the 19th century, and also late 60s of the 19th century, of anarchists literally going on the street and murdering politicians. This is how bad things were in society. This is how those people were feeling. So to go from killing single individual people to killing all of them is not really that hard, Like, just think about this. But of course, this is not all. As you know, we have something in common. We share the language, we share the culture. So maybe, just maybe, the proper way to answer those questions is looking at what is connecting us, other than dividing. And if we connect as a nation, then we can divide other nations and conquer them because we are clearly the superior nation. This was a nationalism. Liberalism was also an ideology, but it was much more like this elite mentality. It was for the people in the cities who made it, okay? It was for the people in the cities who felt like, from zero to hero, and I know a guy who did this, and I also want to do this, okay? So I support fully capitalism in all of its, glory. What is interesting is that aristocrats eventually lost their social power, okay? They still were wealthy, they still ran the show, but you have many examples of them failing at adapting to the new society, which was very interesting. But from the perspective of a common man, it was still frustrating that those people exist, okay? It was like this rotten compromise. The aristocrats, gave capitalists some free space to do their thing, which is, start factories, develop technology, all of those shit. But in return, the aristocrats could keep their own revenue from lands. And this was also frustrating as hell. If you look also at some, literature of the 19th century, you will find those very interesting few, trends there. My favorite probably is Romanticism, which was like this emotional kind of Arcadia, shit, all of those stories. So basically, like, just chill, man. Don't look at the people exploited. Just feel the vibe of the 19th century, okay? Because you have millions of people depending on some very, very, very delusional, cut from reality, people who decides the fates of nations on the global scale. This is fucking absurd. But there were other, okay, like positivism, which was like, yeah, we can build a better society. We have to, approach the working class. We have to support them. We have to pay them maybe something more, okay? Maybe we should stop, supporting the child labor, although the workers were against those because, well, if you are living enough in an abusive system, you will actually start to kind of adapt to it, okay? You either accept the reality you're facing with, you either, cut yourself off from those reality, you either are a rebel, or you just simply make some negotiations with this, okay? My point is, up to the end of the 19th century, the social frustration was immense, okay? And I think it escalated especially during the First World War, where all of those countries who maintained some sort of this old, aristocracy, ideas of government basically fall apart, okay? You have no longer a German Empire, you have no longer the Austria-Hungary, you have no longer the Russian Empire. But the frustration and the feeling of being lost is something that I really feel in the soul of the 19th century from the perspective of the working man, okay? Because you see in papers the people who are crossing the Atlantic Ocean to fight some, for you, barbarians, but just other humans, okay? This is also something interesting. I think that the 19th century was the best in dehumanizing people. I remember that there is this fucking absurd map of, I think it's a British map actually, which was portraying, the races in Europe. And it was clearly suggested that it's the, the ladder of how this race is, and it was clearly suggesting that we have those better races in Europe and we have those, kind of not really humans, okay? And I really like this map because it's pure absurd, but it's also something in this, way of thinking about the 19th century, in the 19th century, that the people were very good at dehumanizing others. For the capitalist, worker was not human. For the aristocracy, capitalist was not human enough, okay? Not to mention the workers. For peasants, aristocrats were not human. For the monarchs, I think that not even a single man under their rule was actually a human being like them. And it's simply terrifying. Not to mention that we should also add to this the racism, the fact that the colonialism was at its peak. So why consider people who uses bows and spears as their arms, human? I see no reason. If I were a 19th century, colonialist. Yeah. So this era of dehumanization is also present, okay, in the 19th century. eventually, if you would look at the fate of the working man in 1840, and if you look at the condition of the working man in like 1900, you will see that suddenly their lives have gradually improved over time. Okay, either it's due to the political tensions, either it's due to the fact that some parties in parliaments in Europe, which was formed after the Spring of Nations in many cases, they had to do something to prevent people from having a revolution once in a while and killing all of those who rule them. Okay, so you see that there was some progress. Okay, you will not start in 1820 and go to living in some kind of apartment with the running water or the plumbing system or anything. Okay, but in 1900 you will be having this apartment. But in 1900 you as a working man eventually will have this apartment. Is that hopeful? I don't know. It's a very complicated subject, to be honest, but I think that because of those frustrations, many people turn to some crazy ideas. The 19th century is a period where some of most intense philosophical thoughts arise. My personal favorite is Friedrich Nietzsche, because obviously, schizophrenic man, like, give him a Nobel, okay? Give him a Nobel Prize, okay? That's why haven't you done that already? Or maybe they did. Sure, many of those were political ideologies, but many of those were simply how do you approach life. And this thinking about human being interacting with the world was really intense. Okay, you have school of thoughts like realism, which gave birth to materialism, or generally more scientific way of approaching life. But you also have people like phenomenologists who claim that the entire reality is not real and we are just seeing some phenomena, that the material objects are nothing more than just some events that are happening because of our own subjective perspective. This is very interesting, and I really encourage you to dive more into that. Obviously, we have no time for this. I think this video is already too long, but my point is, when you are very frustrated, you are starting to ask even more questions, not only about your social status, not only about political power, but you start to really think about what is happening around me. What is reality in general? How do I know that what I think is true is actually true? All of those questions in its modern sense have arise in the 19th century. Okay, this is the moment where they first appeared. Okay, and I think that my favorite quote from mentioned Nietzsche is the one about killing God. Okay, this is very symptomatic, but I think it's not really understood properly. Of course, everybody understands Nietzsche, but actually no one ever read any book out of him. So I proclaim myself an official expert about Nietzsche philosophy. I have read like 2 of his books. I understood shit, okay? But the quote about killing God, okay, the God is dead. This is the famous Nietzschean quote, okay? What does he mean by that is not really fully, transparent. Because what he says is that, yeah, God is dead and we are the one who killed it. By this, he meant that with the 19th century, and he was writing that at the end of the 19th century, basically all of those old ideas, all of the religious-led ideas were already dead, okay? Because the intellectual thought, intellectualism in general, scientific approach, or the approach of ideologies were the ones that really dominated the stage. There was no more place for God in general. And I think we see it perfectly when we see what was the fruit of the 19th century. And it was the First World War. World War I, World War II, it's all this culmination of Western civilization in general fighting its internal demons, to which they thought that you can cut them out by picking the right delusional dehumanization of others. It's very sad, okay? And I really find it interesting how many people actually follow this, okay? And I think they find it interesting how many people haven't saw some things coming. So obviously, I'm not making this video just to talk about the 19th century, and I still hasn't talked like in a very deep sense. I just wanted to give you like my overall impression about the 19th century. My point is, I think we are in a very similar situation today. Our world is fundamentally flawed in many aspects, whether it's economical or political. I feel like we are no longer having this spirit of having a hopeful future, and it's not on what I experience alone. I think that many people are feeling this way. So how to deal with this, hopelessness, how to deal with this feeling lost, because I feel lost, and I think that the workers in the 19th century who were basically the sons of peasants were also feeling lost in this, because you see this magnificent world where on the other hand you have people who are sailing on exclusive yachts. They are having the best time of their life, spending a lot of money on stupid shit, while you have some people starving, while you have many people not being able to afford the rent or the apartment or the house, maybe in their entire lifetimes. My point is, I don't know what the answer is, but I don't believe that fixating yourself in some ideological answers will make it, okay? Because we have already made those mistakes. We have made those mistakes and it led us nowhere. Of course, there is also some, greater powers at the play. You have to consider the fact that the nature of state is like unchangeable, and all of the states desire power out of all of it, okay? So you have those great powers playing with the other countries, like with pawns. It's something inescapable. It's just the nature of the politics of humanity. But the politics is dictated by the mentality of society and the mentality of the ruling class, and in the general willingness of society to maybe sometimes, just spank those ruling classes a little. I'm not encouraging you to political violence, okay? I'm encouraging you to maybe improve yourself. Be aware of what is going around you. Be aware of the trends you're seeing. Don't be easily fooled, okay? Because I think that we are amazed by the technology we are experiencing, and I think we are amazed by the way our life has changed. But as I believe the 19th century man couldn't really comprehend how much the society has changed, and he still looked for the answers in some traditional forms of social control, or the traditional forms of answers like violence, war, anything. I think we are still prone to that. But now we are even more easily fooled, because you cannot just go to the city and read the newspaper, okay? All of our informational zone has been like thrown into this one environment. You are completely shaped by this. You cannot escape it, okay? We're living in the age of information. That basically means that whoever controls the information de facto controls the world. So next time you will feel very moved by some political stance or ideological stance, consider the fact that it's not something that really defines your life, okay? What defines your life is how you make peace with the world. It's how you adapt to the reality you're seeing, even if there is some reality you're seeing. I believe it is, mainly because we die. So we can surely say that some people are not experiencing this reality right now, and we can surely say that we will not experience it either. Either way, we have something to, we have to cope with this reality. And as I said, you can adapt in many things. You can be acceptive, you can be revolutionary, you can negotiate with that, you can support the state of reality you reach, try your chances, try your luck in this sick game. The people today feel exploited. They are frustrated because some things that were obvious for our ancestors, for our grandfathers, now seems to be completely lost. We're not living anymore like our fathers did, okay? We're living like a lost man in a troubled world. But is there a ray of hope? Well, I think yes. And you may call me an optimist or delusional, but I want you to pay attention to something. Today, it's relatively easy to go to some other country via plane, it's basically nothing. And I want you to look at this very interesting newspaper that I have found while doing some very slightly research to this video. This paper is from the exact day when the information about the Wright brothers inventing their aeroplane, their flying machine, happened. And you clearly see that it's not the big news, okay? It's not like the people were amazed just like that, okay? And I claim that they haven't felt the consequences of this invention until they had to, pass the, some gruesome shit, okay? Like the 2 world wars. But today, this simple information seems to be one of the most important turning points of the century. And I encourage you to look at the world like you look at this newspaper. There are, in the frontal page, horrible news of tensions escalating, of great powers wanting to kill each other, okay? Of the sensation upon the universality of the human crime. But maybe there is a footnote, okay? About some not really known yet invention that will maybe change the lives, if not of you, then maybe of your children for the better. Thank you for watching.